actual data and data points. So if I gave you like a list of data, I don't know, we're going to go in different order. 10, 5, 0, 18, 23, and 7, something like that. Okay, we won't make it long. I just want to show you how to do something pretty cool in your calculator that maybe you didn't know your calculator can do. You are going to need to learn to love this button, and if you don't know that it exists, it exists. Go to where it says Stat, because that's the class you're in. Okay? There is an Edit button, and that Edit button is where you put in lists. So when you hit Enter, you should see L1, L2, L3, L4. If it doesn't say L1, it might say inequex or inequal or whatever. I need to clear that from your memory, so just let me know if your calculator says that in a minute. But if you have stuff in your list, which if you had pre-calc last year, you probably do, you go up, you arrow up to L1, hit clear, enter, and it clears the whole list. Go up, clear, enter. Okay. Now, in list 1, I'm going to enter these numbers right here. Just enter them like they are. So 10, enter 5, enter 0, enter 23, and 7. Okay. Now, here's what's cool. Your calculator will sort this data for you. We're going to do mean, mode, and median. Do you know which one of those has to be sorted? Mean, mode, or median? Next chapter? Which one? Why median? It has to go in the middle, so you specifically have to sort it. Would you agree? And it actually has to be sorted from lowest to highest in what's called an ascending order or a descending order. If I go from lowest to highest. Do I ascend or do I descend? Come on. Ascend. From lowest to highest, I would need to ascend my data. So go back to the home screen. Go back into stat, and you will see sort A, sort D. Do you see those two phrases? Sort A, sort D. So what do you think that means? That means sort ascending or sort D, descending. I'm going to choose ascending. Hit enter. Now you have to tell the calculator what list you want to ascend. So if you look at your buttons above the number 1, 2, 3, do you see how it says L1, L2, L3? Mine is in blue. In order to get that L1, you have to hit second 1, and then it should say sort A L1. You can close the parenthesis, hit enter, and all it's going to say is done. And you're like, okay, well, where is it? Where do you think it is? Back in list, stat, enter, edit. And right now they have just ascended. They have put the numbers in order for you. So when we do median and things like that where you need to put them in order, it'll put it in order for you. Okay? So really cool things. That button, that stat edit button is your best friend. Okay? You really want to constantly be going to that button. We're going to go to another button. We're going to go to bars, this one right here, very soon. But I just thought you should know that and see it and love it and enjoy it. All right, now with that said, take out that little note card I gave you. Some of you, I know you're going to be mad at me. You're like, you gave me a 3x5. It's fine. You'll get all the information on it. Bless you. Bless you.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to fill out this note card first, and then you're going to work on the study guide. And that's it for the day. Oh, this is so sad. I know.
Wait, what time do we go to chapter?
9:10.
Oh.
All right, so section 1.3 was all about sampling techniques. There was 5 of them. Techniques. All right. First sampling technique was random. Okay. How do I know if it's random? Well, if it's random, they're going to generate random numbers. They're going to do things about like maybe rolling dice or something like that. They'll have to say essentially something was done at random, and that would be a random sample. Okay, they'd have to do picking it at random along those lines. Number 2, there was a sample of convenience. convenient sample, that's not random, okay? That's you being here in Metrolina right now at this time, and you're saying, I'm gonna do a sample of my statistics class, because you're sitting here. It's not random, you know? Example, in our class, at the mall, at Walmart, I took my sample. Now, that wasn't random, that was convenient for you, okay? The third type of sampling technique, most of you remember this one, you like this one. This is a systematic technique. And that is what? Do you remember this one? Every case person. So they say, I took a sample of every 10th person. I took a sample of every 5th person. If they say that phrase at all, systematic. That's your answer. Systematic. Once they say that phrase, every 12th person, systematic. The fourth kind is stratified. Think of stratas, layers, okay? So stratified would be 2 or more groups, and they're similar characteristics, and then you pick random, oh, I can't spell random, pick random members from there. So you would separate the groups, and then in the groups you would pick randomly. So if you want an example, like if I said, okay, right now here I would take all the males and all the females at Metrolina. Those are my 2 groups, right? There's my strata. But in those stratas, I pick 10 males, I pick 10 females at random. That's the strata. Do you see that? So they are going to use the word random in here, but you need to know that they're randomly picking inside of a group of similar characteristics. Okay? And then the 5th type is cluster. Don't get confused with cluster. Cluster is like a strata. They have groups, but when they go to sample the groups, they pick all the people in one group. That's the difference between a cluster and a strata. They pick all the people. So if I said, I'm going to do all the males and females here at Metrolina, and you're like, oh, that's a strata. No, no, no. And I take every single female and I sample her. Oh, well, then I've done a cluster. Okay, zip codes. In the zip code of North Carolina, I took all the people in 28079. I mean, that's a lot of people right there. But that's what you did, and you clustered. Okay? If you only chose 10 in the zip code, and then 10 in another zip code, and then 10 and randomly in another zip code, then you're stratifying. Do you see that difference? Okay? So look for that. So that was 1-3. That's really the big ideas from 1-3. Kind of. I think there was a. Then yesterday, I'm going to turn this over. I think I have enough room. Yeah, I'll write this way. No, I'm going to write this way. The lines bother me. We learned about observational versus experimental. Okay? 2 different types of studies, observational versus experimental. And what's happening? I mean, well, the titles give it away. In observational, you as the researcher are observing something. You're just observing. The researcher observes. Okay? I looked at these mice in a lab, and I just looked to see which one was getting fatter. Yay. Okay, that's all you were doing. You weren't manipulating the mice. You were just watching them as they ran in a maze, okay? You weren't necessarily manipulating them. Well, I shouldn't say that because a maze would be manipulation. But you're just observing a track team. You're going out there and you're timing them, okay? And you're just watching their times, okay? Or you're out at a traffic light and you're like, oh, I'm watching to see how many people roll through the red light at this traffic light. It's just an observation, okay? You have not manipulated the subjects in any way. However, in an experimental study, you are manipulating. You have to have some groups here that you're manipulating, okay? So the researcher manipulates. He does something to the mice. I took the one mouse and I shot it up with a drug, and I wanted to see if it died. Sorry, I know, sorry, PETA people. Where's the other mouse? I didn't do anything to it. I just wanted to see if it lived. You're manipulating somehow. Observe, manipulate. Now, from the experimental, we have two different things that are called independent variables and dependent variables. And what's the little phrase that I say? What depends on what? What do we always say? Y depends on X. So if I give you an example, I'm going to actually write an example here, just so you can kind of understand it. A study conducted on the hours spent on homework and your test score. Okay. So does time on homework depend on test score, or do my test scores depend on my homework time? Which one do you think sounds better? Let me say that again. Does spending time on homework depend on my test scores, or do my test scores depend on my homework?
Test scores and then homework.
That sounds better, doesn't it? Right? Okay, so test scores depend on homework. So this must be the dependent, and this one must be the independent. Independent, can't spell. Okay, so you'll have questions like that on the study guide too. Like, just say to yourself, just try to make a sentence like I'm doing right now. Does test scores depend on homework, or does homework depend on test scores? Say it a couple times in your head and make sense about it. Does me doing my homework depend on my test? No, my test depends on me doing my homework. I gotta do my homework, okay? All right, and then the last thing too, and of course I ran out of room. Maybe I'll put it over here. Yeah, I do have a little bit. I'll put it upside down. I don't know where you're gonna put yours, but kind of squeeze it in. It's just misleading stats. And I know we haven't gone over homework, but we will in a minute. Misleading statistics. The main thing you're looking for when statistics are misleading is a small sample size. I forgot to tell you, but it's interesting. But a small sample size is another thing. If they have anything like, oh, we randomly selected 5 people, just because you randomly selected 5 is not a good sample size. You need to do a larger sample size, okay? Another misleading fact, using the mean incorrectly is a big one, because you really don't want to use the mean all the time unless it is normally distributed, which we'll get to. We want to use more like probably the median. Okay, that's a better central tendency. If they use phrases like may help, some, or the word some studies say, okay, well, what studies? Some of them, the whole two, and then of course graphs are misleading. You want to look at those graphs being misled. All right, so with that being said, I'd like you to try this study guide. Now look at your note card here. See how you would do. And then before class ends, we're going to go over this. And then you just have to study this for the next time I see you, which is when? No?
Friday.
I do see you Friday. Okay. A weird day, a weird week of stuff. All right, so try these. Every 5th person boarding a plane.